Music, it makes moments for all of us, right? The moment you first heard that song, the moment you saw them live, the moment you just knew. Music makes moments, but it's also made from moments. Moment You Made It is a show that seeks to find those moments for those artists, creators, and business professionals alike who make music into the moments that you remember. Moment You Made It is a podcast hosted by three creatives from the live music capital of the world. Director of the Texas Music Office, Brendan Anthony, singer-songwriter Fred Andrews, and Executive Director of the Austin Music Movement, Nick Schuley. Moment You Made It seeks to document the most compelling conversations with people that make those musical moments.
Fred, I promise we'll tell you once we're recording.
I don't care.
I'm kidding. We're recording.
I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Well, you already blew your good intro.
You just stifled all my creativity now. Now I don't want to be creative anymore. Anyway, hey, Nick Schuley, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking, Fred Andrews. How are you?
Brendan Anthony, how are you doing?
Fred and Nick, I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. What are we going to talk about today, gents?
Man, a story came up this week that brought back a lot of old memories, and I think we share a bunch. The Gypsy Tea Room is getting torn down. That was a Deep Ellum anchor for years and years. I remember playing there. One of my first really big indicators that the Pat Green Band was gonna change direction to get a little bit bigger. We sound checked. We set up and sound checked at the big stage at the Tea Room, and they said ticket sales were good. Everybody's excited. The new song had been spinning on 99.5 up there, so we knew people were kind of starting to listen a little bit. We took off and went to dinner and went to the hotel to get cleaned up, and we came back and we couldn't get back into the club. There was a line from the door all the way around the club to the next street, and it was the first time we'd sold out a venue in Dallas. And I mean, of course, we were so excited. But from then on, Pat had this string of, more and more people coming to shows. But Gypsy Tea Room was our first big, kind of breakout show. I felt like it was really fun.
So 800 to 1,300 people, kind of, right?
Yeah,
the big room.
Take. Yeah, give or take.
So
Cool
Dallas Deep Ellum, Gypsy Tea Room. That was one of the mainstays to play. That was a great venue in Dallas, right?
Yeah, it was the anchor at the end of Deep Ellum, and then you had 8 Airs where everybody came up, and the guys that kind of revamped Gypsy Tea Room, Brant and Brady Wood, they redid a lot of businesses down there. They revitalized a lot of clubs down there. You had Green Room. I mean, I may get some of these incorrect, but they had Green Room and Trees that they bought, and several other clubs that they kind of revitalized and really kind of turned Deep Ellum around again. Deep Ellum's a place that for years has kind of been cyclical. It's gone up and gained in popularity and gotten kind of cleaned up, and the college kids will go down there, and then it's gotten a little bit, more, gritty.
Dicey.
Have you guys been down there? Were you guys down there before the pandemic?
No, man.
It is...
Not since 98, bro. What are you talking about?
It's been a while since I've gone to Deep
Ellum.
I'm
kidding.
It is... I mean, it feels like it did in, I would say, probably late 90s, early 2000s, kind of 6th Street in Austin. It is... Everywhere's jumping. Everything is everywhere you go, there's people out on the street, in the clubs, and music playing. It's cool, man. I was very impressed, and it's there's a lot of scenes that kind of converge upon that area, which I think is one of the coolest parts about it. It's not just the country kids or the whoever. It's everybody.
Yeah, it was always a mix.
It was growing.
There. Yeah, it was always a mix.
But growing up, Brendan, I mean, you grew up in College Station. You knew what Deep Ellum was. I mean, as a young artist, you're like, Deep Ellum, that's one of the places you got to play. That was the Antones of Austin. That was just that area you got to conquer in Dallas. So
and then they had that big moment of all those bands up there kind of hit the national spotlight.
Right.
Which, Brendan, I'll let you segue into this episode.
Well, it's interesting that this came up, and it really did give me a lot of flashback. Jack Ingram came out of 8 Airs in Deep Ellum in 92, 93-ish, with his record Live from 8 Airs. And one of the guys who helped him get that record out was already a successful artist in his own right. His name was Cary Pierce, and he had a band with his friend Jack O'Neill called Jackopierce, and they were taken off out of SMU. They were fraternity brothers there at SMU, and they started playing these coffee houses, and it really just took off. Their first couple of records were really acoustic bass, some background instrumentation, but really not going for any sort of rock vibe. They were very much like a singer-songwriter duo, perfect for Dallas at the time, perfect for the SMU scene at the time. And they really just in the next, 5 to 10 years blew up. There wasn't a college campus that they didn't absolutely crush, sell out all over the country. And, they also did that kind of mentoring for artists too, with Jack and with a whole lot of others.
Well, Jack Ingram, he had a song of the year. What do you have? He
just had an ACM song that he wrote with Miranda Lambert and John Randall.
Right, but he had a song that went number 1 too. Jack Ingram did, right?
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was that Barefoot and Crazy, and then
it was either Barefoot and Crazy or was it Love You? I don't remember.
It was Love You. Well, I just for people that don't know who Jack Ingram is, I just want to know that he's great guy, great singer-songwriter, and he has had number 1 hits on the country radio. So just want to
Rival podcast as well.
Rival.
Jacking around. It's a good one. I actually really like it.
It's pretty average. I listen to it.
When you're lowest on the totem pole, if you call people your rivals, it really boosts your status. So
we're gonna start coming from the hip hop game. I can tell what's happening here.
Podcast turf war.
I love it. Well, I think all that to say, the news about Gypsy Tea Room and its demolition, and that really kind of closed off a moment in time that Jackopierce exploded from. And I'm so grateful that those guys were willing to talk to us. Nick, when you and I were up in New York doing some work a year or so ago, Jack came over and met us for lunch. He's a fantastic guy. Cary lives in Dallas now, so they have a project called the Dal Hatton Project, while Jack's up doing acting and his arts in New York. Cary's in Dallas with his family and doing music down here, and they combine forces. They just released a new record in April, which is really great stuff. I encourage everybody to check it out. But we had an awesome talk. I hope you all enjoy it. I love catching up with those guys. They're still going strong, and they're a serious blast from a past that was a lot of fun and did a lot of good for a lot of folks. Understanding of where Texas music came from, and in our opinion, the three of us talk about this a bunch. It's where we live. It's what we work on. I think you can't fully flesh out that scene without talking to you about your take on kind of how it got kicked off. You're in Dallas in the late 80s, getting started. There's a movement that's getting started, and by the time Fred's shirt says it all, 1988. But by the time I kind of got aware of the independent and then signed versions of the band, you guys were on just kind of a rocket ship, and by the time I ran into y'all in College Station in the late 90s and in Dallas in the late 90s, when we were starting to make our way around, you guys had done a complete sort of college takeover and were moving into the rest of the country, and had already done that, and it kicked a big hole in the door for a lot of other people. So I think it's really important for people to, when they're trying to understand where this scene started, how the scene started, that we cast the net quite a bit broader and really get some perspectives from people like y'all who are doing independent rock, folk-driven independent rock, and get your take on it. So in that effort, I'll go back to, how you met Cary and what you were doing before. You guys ended up at SMU together, and you and I talked. I think you were both doing the same major, but were you in the same fraternity? How did you guys get connected in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's a funny story. We met literally like the first day of college. So we both went to SMU to study acting. We both had acting scholarships.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a really small program. I think our freshman class was like 15, 20 kids. And, the first day of class, you do like an introduction to the whole department. So all the grad students, all the undergrad students, you go in and you do, like classic theater stuff. You do like a monologue, it's like, and next up, Jack O'Neill doing a monologue from whatever. And I did mine, Cary did his. And then the first day of class, our professor destroyed Cary and I. It was just like, I'm going to send both you guys home. Which, you know, you're wasting everybody's time here, you know. And we kind of bonded over that. So from day one, we were both like, oh man, what are we doing here? And you know, it wasn't very long from there that he was like, well, why don't you come over to my dorm room? I got a, you know, keyboard, and bring your guitar, and let's just, you know, play some tunes. So that by the end of our freshman year, there was a guy we knew in our fraternity who did an every Tuesday night acoustic thing at a really small little place called Mimi's, which was in a strip mall. It's now a check cashing place, but you know, the physical location is still there. And over that summer, you know, we were like, let's do it. Let's just, you know, let's make a little money. Let's play covers and, you know, get free beers. And it sounded like a master plan. And
were you a singer before? I mean, did you sing?
No, I mean, it's hilarious. I started playing guitar in high school, and, you know, my dad would always, you know, he'd say like, play me something. And I'd play him like a snippet of a song. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he'd say, when are you going to play me like a song from start to finish, you know?
And my dad said the same stuff to me. He was like, stop noodling around and start to finish the thing.
Total noodler. So, you know, over that summer between our freshman and sophomore year, Cary put together a tape of songs that we would cover. And it, you know, it was just like a mix of all kinds of stuff from the 80s, 70s, you know. And no, I didn't sing. In fact, you know, not a very good guitar player, singer. You know, I had performance experience, you know, I did theater, you know, so I was kind of comfortable on stage, but not wholly. So, you know, talk about learning on the fly, and also learning, you know, the craft of playing in front of people who are indifferent or drunk, or, you know, it's a great learning experience. And the first songs we ever wrote, we wrote live while we were playing in front of these crowds. And so that every Tuesday night became an every Wednesday night at the Rhythm Room. So we'd play every Tuesday night and every Wednesday night. And we decided to make our first recording, which was a cassette. And that's how far back this goes. So, you know, the first thing we recorded was a cassette. And, you know, from there, you know, we'd get a call from Michigan. Hey, somebody gave me your cassette. Would you guys come play a gig in Michigan? And we'd hop in the van we bought and drive to Michigan for a gig, and then drive back to Dallas. You know, like that was going on the road. Yeah. And
but you get to brag to everybody that you went to Michigan. Oh, we got a gig in Michigan.
On tour. We're on tour.
We're on tour. Yeah. Totally. I mean, we went through a succession of vehicles too, but I think in the spirit of independent music, you know, when we made our first CD, which wasn't too long after that, and Cary's such a driving force behind all of this, you know, at least for me personally, I don't know if this was a vibe, you know, a universal vibe, but it was like, what, you can make a record? I mean, don't you need to get a record label to make a record? Like, aren't there some people that make that kind of stuff happen? And it was really freeing to be like, oh yeah, if we can raise some money, we can go into a studio and make our own record. It's really not.
I mean, this was a big concept. That, I mean, it seems sort of sign of the times now. You raise some money, you make a record, you get that out. If it gets the attention from the folks who are gatekeepers, great. If it doesn't, I'll build something independently. That's become, you know, at least, you know, just speaking for our kind of region, that's become the Texas ethos. And it's interesting that, you know, Cary, like you said, was this kind of driving force who said, well, you know, if they're not lined up to come give us money, let's just raise some and go make what we want to make. And he passed that along to other people too. I mean, I remember Jack Ingram making a record that Cary's very involved in, you know, working with Crystal Clear and Jim Coke and that group over there, that kind of changed a lot of people's minds about what you could do if you wanted to do it. You know, there was that ethos kind of rubbed off on a lot of folks that fundamentally changed several people's trajectories around here, I think. I
think so. And I don't know if it was, you know, at the time, I mean, you got to look back and think that the music industry was embracing CDs. It was like, wow, we're switching over to CDs. It's kind of crazy to think about. But we made that first CD, and basically we ended up signing with A&M Records, but it was purely because we'd created, a groundswell of our own. Cary was, managing the band with Brady, but the two of them together were managing the band. But Cary would reach out to colleges and say, hey, do you guys, he would network, people who are in charge of putting together parties, or so we created this system where we would just start playing. We'd go to Georgia, we'd go to North Carolina, we'd go up to Kansas, and the music sometimes preceded us. The CDs kind of got around. Back then, like a big thing was, people taping shows. You set up a board and tape a show, and like these bootlegs would get around, and we were always cool with that. We were like, yeah, share it as much as you want, but we'd play a show, and then we'd open up our backpack and sell CDs right at the edge of the stage for anybody who was interested. And that kind of experience, led to us going to Nashville for our first show at the Exit Inn, and it was sold out. And the industry was like, okay, who are these guys? I don't know, but okay, like they've done some of the hardest work for us, and
yeah, that's really big. I mean, it parallels experiences that I've been around too. I mean, if there is a thing, and not to speak for all of them, but if there's a thing that record labels love, it's when the A&R has been done by the crowd and the crowd's been built by the artist, and they've got a almost batteries included package to build on. Now, I can go a couple different ways. That can be strip mined, or it can be, you can support it and help build it. And that seems like what y'all did.
Yeah. It was kind of a, we kept doing our thing, and then the pieces of the puzzle just, kind of grew from there. Booking agency, management, record label, and then the exposure that the record label could get us. I mean, that got us on Conan O'Brien. That got us, meetings with T-Bone Burnett, who produced our record. That got us meetings with, important people in the industry that would have been tougher to do, obviously, on our own. But if we hadn't started on our own, if we would have waited for somebody to notice, like, oh, you guys should make a record, and we're gonna be the ones who fund you. I don't think we wouldn't have gotten there. So
yeah. I think you touched on, pardon me, something interesting, Jack. Like it a lot of the artists in like kind of the scene you guys came at, not necessarily Dallas, but like the genre, I think were really open to letting people record shows, which at the time, like for people now, that it's easy to, get a show. Everybody records everything or whatever. Nobody cares. But I remember like guys sitting in the audience with their little DAT player or whatever it was, and these artists would kick their ass. Like if they saw them doing something or saw them doing that. But it's crazy to me that many of the bands like you guys that were so open to letting their fans, like do that and share it, that you guys still, almost every artist that I remember collecting things like that, you guys still draw, and like you can still do a show because everyone feels such a connection. And I think it's like, I mean, I'm sure there's fans that know what you say in between certain songs at certain shows that were recorded in 1995, and it's like, but it was a big thing. And I still feel a connection to so many artists from your scene because of that, I think.
It's a Grateful Dead, Dave Matthews model kind of.
For sure.
Like, let's give it away and let's go deliver when we get there. But the more people know about it, the better. And, a lot of bands and your records are fantastic. The live show really draws you in, and having that precede you, like you said, is huge. I wanted to ask a question, and it's kind of it's a detail I've always been fascinated with, and I've gotten to know Brantwood over the past several years in his involvement in different festivals and these entrepreneurial things he does. I just find him really interesting, and I find he and his brother really interesting, and I know that those guys were, well, not to put words in anyone's mouth, but they were an important part of your kind of coming up in the mid 90s and early 2000s, having, like you said, having Brady involved as a manager, co-executive producer or executive producer of records, and his involvement eventually with A&M and getting you those kind of meetings. I mean, those guys had such a reach into the revitalization of Deep Ellum as well, because their interests ran to owning bars and restaurants and changing the way people perceived that place and that scene. And you guys sort of hand in gloved into a lot of the things that were going on down there with them too. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what that scene was like and their involvement and your involvement with them in building it a little bit?
Yeah, Brady has been with us from day one, and I think the amazing thing about Brady is, I always look to him as like, he knows, and the energy of Brady and Brant both is just such a powerful, positive energy, and they really believe in what they're doing, and the whole idea of having a good time and bringing people together and good food, good music, good times. Maybe that's a piece of their New Orleans
yeah.
Coming through. But they both just what I always took away from those guys was just a real positive attitude of, let's do it, just let's go do it. This is a great idea. Let's do it. Which was, I don't really think that way a lot of times. I'm a little, it can be a little more guarded and maybe a little more cynical sometimes. But with that, and then going into Deep Ellum and Gypsy Tea Room and the Green Room Restaurant, it was a really fun time in my life, because there was so much creative stuff going on, like people in restaurants were rock stars to me, and the people who were putting together these killer music venues that had vibe and, a place you really wanted to go and check out music. And it was open to bringing in new music or new experiences for people. It was really important, and really just investing in your place, investing in your home, your hometown. Brant and I were roommates for a few years in the M streets. And I mean, my love for those guys is tremendous, but those were some great times, great memories.
So not to ambush you, but I had a long talk with Brant about this today. This morning, he and I spoke for a while, and we kind of reminisced a little bit. Our band, the Pat band, was a huge recipient of the work that they did and y'all did down in Deep Ellum. One of our biggest places to play ever was Gypsy Tea Room, and we were kind of coming up. Our very first sellout was at Gypsy Tea Room, and Brant and that group that was hanging around them were, so hospitable, and it created so many creative places like you said, had a vibe to them, that going to play Deep Ellum felt like a safe thing to do. It felt like a kind of momentous thing to do. The crowds that they helped us build there, I mean, definitely changed our whole path. And so I've definitely stayed in touch with Brent and watched what he's done and tried to keep in touch. And like you said, he's a very, very forward-thinking, positive guy, and he wanted me to make sure. And you're covering a lot of these points, so not too much of an ambush. He wanted me to make sure that we covered Mimi's and Rhythm Room, because he was like, these guys didn't come from nowhere. I mean, they put their time in on the stage, meeting their fans and working stuff out before they became the band that you saw in front of 10,000 people for the first time, that sort of thing. But he was like, yeah, I want to make sure that they cover the definition of a couple of guys. Do you remember what that is?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I think the first T-shirt we made was Jackopierce, just a couple of guys. And
brilliant.
Oh man. But that's a good point. And Cary and I talk about this, now, in the past years when we're making new records, we talk about the fact that, a lot of times we'll show up in a studio, or even now, like I'll record vocals here in New York, whatever it is. Back then a song will have already lived live for an extended amount of time. It had been road tested, and now we'll go into a studio, and there are times where I'm like, I got to finish this song like now, because I've been waffling on, some lyrics or whatever it is. And, we miss that. We miss that ability to, take a handful of songs, play them live, see what's working, what doesn't, what people respond to, see where we live within it, in terms of how we play together, how we sing together. And, stuff like, the stuff like, I guess they call it a residency, but playing at Mimi's every Tuesday night, there was it was just, that was what it was.
And you look forward to it every time, right?
It was, man, and we'd have our routine after the show. We'd pack up our PA. We'd probably hit the McDonald's across the street. We'd pretend we were doing a Rolling Stone interview, or whatever it was, just theater nerd stuff. And then we would do the Wednesdays, so they were 2 standing gigs every week. So I just remember times where, Tuesday night Mimi's, Wednesday night at Rhythm Room, Friday night drive down to College Station, Saturday, fraternity party at UT, and it was at the same time we were both, in school. Yeah.
In name.
trying to study, but I was so uninterested in school. I think both of us were, and we were still doing our creative thing. We were doing the acting thing, but we were, starting to write songs and figuring out what the future would look like. And there was some point in there where the two of us are driving around in a van where it's like, wow, this is it. Like, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm going to keep doing.
Yeah,
and
kind of clicked that, like, oh, we're doing our profession now.
Yeah. Just kind of, and then you would have these experiences, you talk to, working with T-Bone Burnett, obviously a formative experience, a hugely just mind-blowing experience. But T-Bone Burnett would talk to you like, the young guy just entering the business. He'd be like, well, in, X amount of time, when you get, and you're like, wow, this guy's talking to me like I'm here to stay. And, it was empowering and frightening all at the same time. But without going out and being able to play live.
Well, let me back into that. Let me help you back into that, because I think there's something to be said. There's a deeper conversation about how y'all made that record and what the sound was after that. How are you?
Right on time.
Dude, I'm so confused. I knew Brennan was in here, but then I got 2 other guys I don't know yet. What's happening? I know the guy in the bottom. Hey, Jack, how you doing?
Jack, hey, Cary, I can vouch for these guys. I can vouch. Good fellas.
It's a good can you got on there.
Yeah,
all right.
Man.
Cool. Sorry. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm not gonna give you excuses. I'm
Jack, that guy, I can point you. That's Nick Shuley.
Yeah.
Pointing the wrong way, Fred.
Yeah, everybody's in different spots, Fred. Yeah, there we go. That's
not how it works, Fred.
Yeah, I'm Nick Cary. Good to meet you.
Nick Shuley.
Yeah, what's up with Nick with the radio voice here? We got like a real radio podcaster guy going on here.
Definitely.
Hey,
how's it going, guys? This is Nick Shuley. Yeah, good to see you. Let's go for the podcast.
Yeah, Nick's got some game. Fred's got some game too. When he turns it on, man. He turns it on.
Dude, you got a tobacco burst telly behind you. That's not a thin line though. Just straight up telly.
Yeah, it's like a 80s or 90s. I can't remember. And,
American made.
Little hummingbird back there. Yeah, of course.
Red, white, and blue.
Oh hell yeah!
That's
little hell yeah.
That's right. I gotta look cool.
That looks cool. Yeah,
I'm a guitar player.
What about my background? Me and Jack's background are awesome. I got a little orange pillow.
Mine's just my living room, so
you got a little orange pop on your blue couch.
Yeah, I've seen Nick's background before on a few podcasts. I think that's a backdrop, like a green screen that you can just drop in. That's
actually witness relocation.
Just a cookie cutter house.
Home.
Pinnacle.
It's a solarium.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry guys, what did I miss? You guys.
So Cary, I was breaking down the lyrics for "This Is More Like Therapy," and
we would never do that to you.
Did you sing it?
So what did you mean when you said?
Now's the perfect.
Now, when I said Cary's a dick, I mean, I just want to clarify.
Bear in mind, I never thought he'd join the cast here, so yeah, we never have to start like
purposely sabotaged his Zoom calendar invite.
So I want to go
Oh,
back.
right.
You were talking about the Gypsy Tea Room, how warm it was and how great it was to sell it out. Brendan and Jack, that place was daunting. I mean, it was scary if you couldn't fill it. It was a big.
It was
venue.
built for speed, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You had to bring it.
Well, that's why they had this small room. They had, what was
Played
the small
that
room called?
It was just the Gypsy Tea Room side room, right? I mean, it was
called something.
What did they call it? No, they called, I think the proper, we have to check with Brant on this. Brant Wood owned it.
I'll ask him. I'll text him here.
But I think, text him, because it was, I think the Gypsy Tea Room was the small room. And then I think the big room was kind of the Gypsy Tea Room, big room. But I think the actual Gypsy Tea Room proper might have been the small room. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm curious if I'm correct.
I asked him. I'll see what he says. You may be right. There were all sorts of great bands that I saw there too. And it was essentially what we're saying, Cary, is, we were kind of digging into, of course, the genesis of Jackopierce, the time spent at Mimi's and Rhythm Room, the time you really got to hash it out and learn in front of people, which is so fantastic for folks. And we slightly, we touched on, how, the ethos became, let's not wait around for the record labels. Let's make our product. Let's figure out how to do this. And that changed the lives of a lot of people, Jack Ingram being one, and many other folks that I worked with, being the recipient of that ethos, or that idea is like, okay, I accept that idea that I don't need the infrastructure to do it. I'll do it myself. I'll find some money. I'll make a great thing and bring people to me, and then people will take notice. And that led us into a real advantage I thought y'all had. This was my perception as an outsider then, is you had these guys in Brant and Brady Wood who were, creatives. They were positive people. They looked to make a positive impact, and by and large on the place that they loved. And to us, that was Deep Ellum. There was Gypsy Tea Room and Jeroboam eventually, and Green Room, and Green Elephant was a lot of fun, of course. But there were these great places that they helped create that you felt like a lot of thought had been put into. And I was kidding around. If you played the big room at Gypsy, you had to. It was built for a crowd. You had to bring people to see you there. And I thought that was a big advantage that y'all had, was you had some really good minds working with you too, and Brady and Brent. I know Brady worked with you guys forever in kind of management too, but they were creative. They created vibe type places that were fun to be a part of.
Yeah, I think it's two things that pop up in that. Yes, absolutely, surrounding yourself with people that are creative, that drive you. I'll go on record to say we really, that kind of drive we had with Brady, who's constantly pushing us, constantly, hey guys, try this, try that. And the best part about it is we failed a lot. We did a bunch of ridiculous stuff. We still, if you can find the Finest Hour booklet, inside there's a merchandise booklet inside Finest Hour that had like candles, hacky sacks. I mean, we were just like, why not? Let's try it. Let's go for it. And which is
against the wall, yeah,
commonplace today. I mean, people are doing, you name it, they'll put the brand on it, but constantly pushing the envelope, constantly pushing, and something, thinking I'm just such a big proponent of, and young artists that are watching this, the idea that if I just get the agent, if I just get the manager, if I just get that gig, if it's very iffy to me. And I really strongly believe, and I tell this to my boys, my kids, I've got a 20-year-old man now for a son. And I tell him over and over again, you just have to continually think about what you want and continually go after it. And you have to do this. This is what I wanted to say, is I've said this for years, is you've got to keep doing it till you can't do it anymore. Meaning book yourself and book yourself and book yourself and fight that fight till all of a sudden you wake up, you go, I can't do this anymore, because there's so much work to be had that there's people all over the place raising their hand going, I'll do it. You've got 20 gigs a month that I can book and I can make this much money as your agent. All of a sudden the hands go up. So you do it till you can't do it anymore, which is just that whole concept, be the janitor, be of your company. I mean, learn every facet of your business as you grow. And then by the time you hand it over, you're handing over a really well curated, put together piece of business, not just like, this is the last thing I'll say about this, but I always say it should be a marriage, not an adoption when it comes to agent, manager, label, anything. It should be coming together, synergy, if you're looking for someone just to scoop you up and pick you up, then, you know, join the Backstreet Boys and then go that route. I mean, it never works out well for those guys. You're going to be,
and you'll have not very much. You'll have not very. Sorry to interrupt, but you'll have not very much creative input down the line, anyhow. Fred, what you got?
So having to do all the booking, the management, the touring, the gassing up the car, you know, after you do all that and then you get off the road for 4 or 5 days, how in the hell do you want to pick up your guitar and write a song?
That's a great point. And you know what? Golly, it's funny you asked that right now. By the way, have you got a lot of information from Jack? Is it my turn to talk? Because I'm caffeinated up and I'm ready to go.
Let's go.
Bring it.
I'm very hot on this because the great Bob Schneider has influenced me greatly on writing a song a week. I have a slogan. This is play every day. We have huge goals that I know to get to these goals, it's going to require new songs, completely new fans from all over the world for, you know, all new. And that only comes if I start writing the songs. Obviously we could cover great songs also, which we're having a lot of fun with, but man, it's tough sometimes. Yeah. Like I have to play guitar every day. I have to play guitar every day. I pick up the guitar because every time I pick that thing up, something happens. Every time I am putting it on my phone, the idea, and then that idea turns into an idea, you know, further. And Jack and I are doing that more and more and more. So, and we've put new like accountability in place by having the Dal Hatton Project, having our new Patreon thing we've just released, requires us now to deliver at least a song a month and a cover, very minimum. Plus we're now posting every Monday. So putting those in place and putting boundaries around that creativity time. I mean, this is all brand new, guys. This is literally like, I've been listening to Donald Miller's podcast and I listened to this guy he interviewed. His name is Nir, N-I-R, and he talks about time management. And he's just like, whatever it is you do best and you're focused on and you want to do, you've got to put, you know, a barrier around it and not be distracted. You've got to, I mean, so for me, it's like I spend 2 hours a day with that guitar in my hand, no matter what, even if it's not pretty, it's not perfect, it's 45 minutes here and it's an hour and 15 minutes there, whatever it is, that guitar is going to be in my hand. And mark my words, you know, I mean, well, the proof is, I mean, I've written a song a week for the last like 8 months. So nice. And they're all giant hits. So
well, I want to back you up a little bit. Cause I think both you guys, like what you just said and what you guys were doing at the time. Yeah. was not, I mean, nowadays there's a handbook for an independent artist, right? You know, you can like, I can do it myself because I know I can go get, you know, I can put my stuff on TuneCore, wherever. I can do everything myself. But back then that wasn't a common thing. The understanding, I mean, everybody here knows this, like the understanding was like, oh, well, the only way to make a record is to go to a record label and do these things. And you guys just kind of said, screw it. Let's just figure out how to do all this stuff. Was that from watching anyone in particular? Or was that just you guys hustling? Like where does that come from?
Good question.
Well, early on, we became huge fans of, I'll use Samples as an example, Great
band.
Yeah, great rhyme. They just blew our minds with, you know, them, like all those bands, all the grassroots bands, Widespread was in there. A handful of these bands we used to get on their mailing list. We just watched what they would play. So we used them as kind of a model and we just kept, you know, watching them. And then I got to say back to Brady, you know, Brady Wood had a great business mind. Brady Wood was running his family's company at like in high school. So he had a really good handle on just business. Like, hey guys, you know, he just saw that we had an audience. He could see the pieces and he saw what we could do. He saw that could draw a crowd. He saw that, you know, so I have to give a lot of credit to Brady. I was a hustler. I was a hustler in high school. I hustled. I created, perfect example. Just like you just said, it didn't exist. So like in high school, I live in Westport, Connecticut, a really small town outside of New York City. And there's no place to play if you're 14 years old. There's no open mics. You could literally have to go to New York City, to do something that wasn't going to happen at age 13, 14, whatever. So started a band bash, you know, and that was an outlet for us to be able to play on a huge stage, you know, in front of the whole school. So if it doesn't exist, go create it. I'm a huge proponent of that. Like friends that sit around like, oh man, you know, like Jack can totally attest to this. People that, you know, with acting and stuff, it's like, there's a lot of people that just get fed up with the, you know, waiting around for something to happen. So they go write a script, they go create a channel, they go make something happen because they want to create. I just always want to encourage those folks that are sitting on the sidelines that are like, oh, well, they just need something to happen. If this could happen, if I get the part, if I get the, man, great. But I just way more interested in people that are constantly trying and going for it. Did that answer your question? I got all excited again.
No, that's exact. I think it's really interesting to hear the other bands that like you guys were watching, or like ways that ways that came about. It's really interesting to me, just because it was that Grateful Dead, like the bootleg model and things like that, and it's really interesting.
I'll keep it in that vein for a second, because what I'd like to do a little bit too is to let folks know who are watching how important y'all were, and that work ethic was, and that hustle was, to a lot of artists who kicked off a big scene in Texas when I was coming up. And I mentioned Jack Ingram to Jack earlier when we were starting this, and Jim Koch at Crystal Clear, and that sort of thing that was there. If you were a writer and you started to build a crowd, and you had good songs or songs you were proud of, and you could raise some funds, you could put these things out yourself. And the door that kicked open for so many people down here, I think people should really take note of that. And to say that y'all were right in the middle of that would be a true statement. And having in-depth conversations with Ingram, who was doing this, if you look at 92, 93, during that time when he was establishing his kind of vibe at 8 Airs and some other places he was playing, he'll look back and say, look, I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have made that without Cary and Jack around and kind of seeing what they were doing, and them reassuring me and pushing me to do that. And when his record came out, and we all looked at the liner notes to see who put that out, and it was by Jack Ingram, and it was by y'all, it was really eye-opening. And I think that, and it's not, Fred and I joke about this all the time, it's not that, oh man, if he can do it, we can do it too. That's not it. I can't write those songs Jack wrote, and I'm not ever going to be Jack Ingram. But if that hustle can net you that, then why can't we try for that too? And I think that scene benefited so much from that way of thinking.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because of course Pat Green pops into my head also.
Sure.
I remember Pat used to show up at our shows. He'd come onto our bus. He'd have had a cocktail or two. Or anyway, he'd come on our bus, and we'd be like, oh God, we loved him, but he'd be like, oh God, here's come Pat Green. And he just insist on playing us a new song. I just wrote this new song, or he'd play us a Jerry Jeff song or something. And it was just hilarious. But look at him, man. He just kept driving. I don't really know much about his career. I just assume it was very similar. You get out there, you play for this fraternity, this sorority, this group at this college, and you just keep concentric circles growing. Man, I mean, Pat, and Ingram has told me the story. He stood there at the Rhythm Room on one of our Wednesday night gigs, which one of the greatest things ever. Like, Bob Schneider still plays every Monday night at Saxon Pub.
Yep.
Genius, because he gives all his new material at bats. He does whatever he wants. It's his show. He does it the way he wants it. He's not there to play 40 Dogs, 5 times. He's there to do his thing. He's been such an inspiration, because it made me realize Jack and I had such formative years playing Mimi's every Tuesday night for Jack, 2 years almost? Same for Rhythm Room. Rhythm Room was every Wednesday. And then out of that came so many other opportunities, because people would be like, oh, we became the SMU mixer band. Then we became that for UT. Then we became that for, Trinity. Then we, it just kept growing, again, concentric circles, which is such a model. And now that we're here, and I'm sure the core of this podcast is just to help younger artists grow, is finding that the college thing it's a multi-million-dollar career I can hand anybody if they want it. It's just, they have to take it, which is finding out you've got anywhere from 600 to 60,000 people within a couple miles of each other, all doing stuff together. So that was our entire foundation of our career that we're still living on from this to this day. And then was all these colleges, fraternities, sororities, organizations on campuses, and they would just spread. And then, of course, you add the major label to that, That was just complete icing on top. Then all of a sudden, we're on Conan O'Brien, we're on Rosie O'Donnell, we're in Rolling Stone, we're on the end caps at Borders Music and Sound Warehouse. And you know what I mean? Like, we're really making a splash now. So not only do you hear us on the radio, now you go into Borders and there we are. It was like boom, 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 all fuel on the fire. So, you know, you got to start that fire. Even we're still struggling today. Like today, I still keep sending music to people that I know at labels. I keep going, man, this is a hit. This is like, oh yeah, you know. Well, just what they're really saying is start a fire, and then we'll come pour some gas on it. But we're not going to start that fire for you.
Yeah, Jack made a really good point about, you know, your first time to go play Exit In, and the crowd was packed. And a point he made was that, you know, gosh, if you can do the A&R for the label, and if you can do the crowd building for the label, and you come essentially batteries included, God, labels love you. Then it can go one of two ways. They can take you and make you something different, or they can allow you to be creative. So that leads me to the next sort of phase. And we had just started covering this when you jumped on. I'd love your perspective on it. So, you know, a couple of really good acoustic records that I went back and listened to the last couple of days and just remembered why I loved them all over again. And then, you know, you had the A&M Records involvement, which led to that T-Bone experience that created the Bring It On the Weather, which in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, you have your own take, you made the thing, but that changed the way your sound grew and went from then on, right? Because you were really putting, acoustic melodies and acoustic presentation foot forward for a long time, and then it became this more kind of complicated thing. Can you kind of sum up that experience and what it was like to go work with someone like that, and how you watched your sound grow, I guess, from that record on a little bit?
Jack, were we playing with the band on the road when we got signed, or were we purely acoustic when we got signed?
No, when the first time we played with a band was with Max Weinberg on Conan O'Brien.
That's how
on
you
live television. I was like, I've never played live with a band before. Good thing it's live on network television.
Can y'all keep up with me, please?
Holy hell.
But so we had not, I mean, when we walked in with T-Bone, it was, I mean, we recorded, with full instrumentation a little bit, but it was not.
And was it his take to like, hey, let's just fill this in? You've got a great rhythm and a sound going. Let's fill this in. Or was it y'all's kind of want to do that? Or
I think it was T-Bone Burnett. We were like,
yeah, it was just T-Bone. That's how T-Bone makes a record. Yeah. T-Bone. That is interesting because we did with Woman of Salvation was a fully produced record. So I think we'd already kind of went that direction. Yeah. What's interesting, isn't it? It's Woman of Salvation was a record, but then the next thing was Live from the Americas, which was just us acoustic because that's how we played. And
which was a big live take on what y'all did, and having your friends on with Vertical and really showing people who may not have been aware about the band just how big it really was. I mean, it was an eye-opening record for sure.
I'm sorry, there's a line halfway around the block.
That was great.
That's Keith from Vertical. And man, you know what? I think, there's many times in there, and you'll love this because one of the bands I thought of was David. We just thought David.
Great guy. Yeah, he's
fantastic.
Awesome.
Twang Twang Shaka Boom was like, Twang Twang Shaka Boom exploded, and the whole world does not know what we know, being in that time frame, how huge Twang Twang was, and just what a phenomenon it was. And it was just one of those truly, like, you just heard things and you maybe saw a little article. There's no internet yet, so you just heard things, and then finally get to see them live at the we saw them the first time at the Rhythm Room and saw David, and it was just a 3-piece, and we're like, oh my gosh, we were just amazed. And then he formed his band with Clay, and Clay, I remember seeing Clay, meeting Clay or whatever, become friends with Clay, and being like, man, how do you guys? Clay Pendergrass, sorry. And I was like, what is it? What do you guys got? I mean, how do we get there? And he's like, you need a band, man. We're like, yes, we need a band. So it was like multiple places, because especially even like we all get into this because we want to meet girls, and we want to be the cool guy at the party, and maybe not just the guy in the corner at the party. And I was like, why are these girls all up in the front row jumping up and down and singing your songs? He's like, because we're a band, dummy. And I was like, oh, we need a band. So anyway, that's a long story longer, but David was a huge influence on just musically. And then he produced the original. Did he produce it or he just sang? But he also produced a couple songs on Woman of Salvation and sang backup. And then his band, Clay came up and played. And so did Michael, what's his name?
Jerome.
No, not Michael Jerome. Michael Jerome played on Live 25, but
Right.
what was his, the drummer? Bald, black guy. Was he bald? He had always had different kind of cool hairdo. Super. Michael Hale.
Oh, Michael Hale.
Michael Hale on drums. So Michael Hale played drums. And so we basically had the Love Beats, David's backing band, come back us up on, I think, Ocean maybe and Vineyard. And then David was the one who created Jack's low part, the Stay on the Vineyard for the Summer. That was David's idea. Oh, nice. David's idea to get rid of the word grandmother in the song Vineyard. The original lyric was, my grandmother takes me to the ferry. And he's like, A, you need a band. B, maybe it was David that said you need a band. I can't remember if it was David or Clay, but anyway.
And no grandmother in songs, fellas.
No grandmother in songs. So and David, yeah.
So I like the whole band scenario, but I really liked, you were talking about how spread out and how fast your music went from town to town. Well, I mean, you had bands like myself playing your songs, saying their R's all the time, everywhere, because your music, coming from an acoustic standpoint, and Jack was talking about earlier how he learned to play guitar basically in high school, and he said he wasn't a very good guitar player, so the chords weren't like this crazy ass chords, but the melody and the songs were so good that I learned all your songs and played them in front of people claiming they were mine, and I think you had probably everybody doing that across the colleges, so it was really great. So when you changed over to the band stuff, it was a lot harder to learn those songs for,
it's still acoustic. It was still acoustic foot forward driven, though. That's what I like most. It was really accessible. Layering it up with those things, I think did a lot for how big it could be. How big of a crowd you could entertain with the songs. I think that was a big takeaway for me. It was, the acoustic records were accessible. The harmonies were great. The melodies were fantastic. And then when you add on the band component, you can play those kinds of songs in front of much bigger rooms, right? I mean, that will drive an audience.
But they were selling out San Marcos. I mean, at Gordo's, and you were selling out every College Station. The two of you guys. I mean, that's the way to do it. That's great.
Well, it's still a model that works for us. Like, we still go put our guitars on our back. We'll meet up in a city, play. Very typical Jackopierce tour would be fly to Nashville, meet up there, play Nashville, drive to Atlanta, and the next day it's Birmingham, and then we fly out of Birmingham. It's just like a very, very efficient, economical. You throw 2-3 band members in there, flying them all in. Got to get the
hassle.
Fiddle player to come play.
Never know where he is.
Oh my gosh!
Anywhere.
Wrestle him out of some bar at like 2 a.m. But yeah, I mean, it still works, but man, it's just. Jack and I both know we love the acoustic show, and we love knowing we can go back to back brothers in arms, and we can go do this. Yeah. But it's also just so freeing to play with a band, to step away from the mic, to let the guitar player take a solo, to have all those instruments. I mean, ultimately, we listen to that kind of music probably 95% of the time. We're not just sitting around listening to Bon Iver, if that's the right way to pronounce it.
Acoustic jamming.
Yeah, just super acoustic, and anyway, you know what I'm saying? I love it all, but this is my problem is I produced the Promise of Summer record, the Everywhere All the Time record. I produced some of the, what's it called? Every Day Should Feel This Good, the Feel This Good record. And I finally was like, I just got to back away from it, because I'll just keep adding things to it. I don't want to do that. I want to get back to the Bringing on the Weather. Like, my 20-year-old son, his very favorite song, and he's a total muso, loves music, super deep on music, way into it, has like 600 playlists. His favorite record to this day is the White Record, like you guys are talking about. And his favorite song from that is the most simple song, Circle. One guitar, and it's his favorite song. It's, that song was like, just Jack and I just threw that together randomly. And then you must have brought it to me, Jack, because you play it. Like, it's just a simple. Anyway, we played it the other day on our Stage It show, and it was like, what is this one again?
Yeah, that was a great idea until we had to execute. And I was like, oh, I think I don't remember it.
I think I don't remember. I'm
Well,
forgetting it.
That's the thing, the thing about, the two of us showing up with, two guitars, a bag with some gear is, super simple and wonderful. I mean, still my primary songwriting thing is to pick up the acoustic guitar and just make noise in my house. And I love the simplicity of it. It's like you have this machine that you can make everything out of. I'm not saying this is any good, but you can make anything out of it, and it's so self-contained and so easy to do. But when we have a band, it feels, first of all, there's not as much of a responsibility for Cary or for me to be solely responsible for holding, 500 people or whatever. We'll play 2 acoustic guitars for 2,000 people is pretty, to keep those people here is pretty difficult. Having a full band definitely gives you room to relax a little bit, and it frees everything up. Mm-hmm. And then you get in that vibe where the band is played together more than 2 shows in a row, and suddenly you're starting to gel, and things become more expansive. That's the ability to be able to toggle between both of those, I think, is pretty priceless for us, because we can, say, hey, this thing came up in Detroit, let's go do it, just me and you, and feel good about it. Mm-hmm. And then do a bigger show with a full band.
Well, it's 2 different things. I definitely came to know the Jackopierce product, if you will, not to dehumanize it, but the Jackopierce product, if you will, in front of a lot of people with Clay and Earl and a pretty much full, a canon of a show, right? And it was really eye-opening for me. And you mentioned Pat Green earlier. I mean, it's really eye-opening for guys like us who were, just fumbling our way towards something, to see that and to see the kind of energy you brought. It's two different shows, and it's 2 really interesting products. And to be able to hold a crowd, just the 2 of you as well, is a real skill. But that brings me to a question. So you've had, since the late 80s now, a fan base that you've cultivated. Sorry, that look on your face. You've cultivated this fan base that's intensely loyal. They'll go on trips with you. They'll come to your Christmas show. They'll download or buy your stuff. They are invested Jackopierce fans, and they have been, many of them, since very, very early on. I count myself as one of them. But there's a relationship here that has fed a lot of these songs you've created, and it's a story that kind of a lot of people know. There's only so much time you can spend with your head down, really grinding on something with a full intensity, before it starts to need a slowdown or a break. And not to delve into anything super personal, but you guys took a break. And what is really interesting to me, and my point in saying that, what's really interesting to me and gratifying as a fan and as a longtime watcher, is that you took that break and whatever that meant, and came back to re-engage with your fans in a new way. And when I see y'all play, it's really a fun experience to see y'all play, and it's very obvious that you came back to do those things for reasons that you both understood, and that kind of energy is a great thing to share with folks. Is there anything you kind of want to say to sort of address how a restart happened, or what it means for you guys, and how you address your fans now? Or
Yeah, I was waiting for Jack to speak, but if you're not going to speak, I'll speak.
Well, I'd say Brant and Brady again.
That's right.
Yeah, they were there for that.
Nice.
They put us back together. It was their idea. They got us both on the phone. Brant lived with Jack. I lived with Brady for 5 years. We were like each roommates, each had our pod. So Brant would go to Jack and Brady went to me, and it was just a perfect time in our lives where I was going through the hardest time of my life. I was going through divorce, hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. This was 18 years ago. And I got the call. It was like this, they had reached out here and there, and it just wasn't the right time. Then all of a sudden it just happened to be I don't know how Jack, it's a good question for Jack, but how, I'm curious, Jack, like, where were you at? Because a year prior to that, you weren't ready, but somehow in that season, and we had the idea, I think Brady and I dreamed and schemed of, what if Vertical Horizon was your backing band? So it wasn't just me and Jack showing up and seeing each other, being like, hey, dude, what's up? And having to deal with each other. It was an amazing buffer to have these beautiful human beings, Matt Scannell, Sean Hurley, Ed Toth. Was Keith there too, or just the three of them? Probably just the three of them.
You guys weren't talking at the time? Y'all didn't talk like every week?
They've not spoken in 5 years.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
So you can imagine coming back, and now all of a sudden you had this element of one of our favorite bands, our favorite people that there's no two bands that have toured more together than JPVH. And it just felt, and I've made a lot of records. I produced a lot of records, and Sean Hurley played on all of them. And Sean Hurley and I had a rapport for years, writing together, working together, him playing on my records that I produced. So it was really, really special to have those guys be there as a buffer to kind of, you know what I mean? It was backstage. There was like 7, 8 people. You had Brady, you had Brant. Jack and I didn't have to like stand there and look at each other and be like, hey, dude, what's up? Yeah, I called you like 5 years ago. Did you get the call?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. A couple of things. That reminds me of a couple of things. So I was living in New York, and I was involved with a theater company downtown in New York, the Flea Theater, the Bat Theater Company. And we were doing really cool theater in New York. And I was working with a company of people. And I don't know what the realization was, but there was a realization there that like, man, that was a pretty amazing experience, what Cary and I had. And now that I'm doing something totally different, but not that different with another group of amazing people, like, what am I doing, And, Brant and Brady got involved, and then Cary came to New York, and he came to my apartment, and we saw each other for the first time.
Right.
And we literally like, hey, what's up? What's up? And we picked up our guitars and we started playing together. And when I tell you, I'm kind of getting a little misty eyed right now. I kind of am, because it felt it was just so nice. And then like a couple days later, one of my neighbors, it's New York, so I don't know who it was, but they're like, hey man, were you playing guitar in your apartment the other night? And I'm thinking this guy's going to have a beef about the noise. And he was like, sounded really good. And he had a point, it just felt so good. And really for me, I'm not going to speak for Cary, but for me, like just that getting together in my apartment and playing together, I was like, this is foolish. Like we should be
magic. There's some magic.
Yeah. Yeah. We should be.
Let me say this too. I think, look, it's amazing and very adult and very mature to have that, to take those steps, obviously in any relationship, especially one that is so creative and has so much longevity. It's tough to take those steps, but I'm glad you did. It's from an outsider's perspective. Again, it was really interesting to see that decade record, that like the big New Year's show with Matchbox, and like this big, what felt like to, folks who were watching, who were big fans of y'all and Texas music, like this kind of rocket ship that was happening. And then the kind of the sort of break announcement, that was it. And, Godspeed. And when y'all did start playing music again together several years later, it was a good thing to see. It's like it was obvious, based on the break, that a break needed to happen for whatever reasons. But the fact that you could take the steps to get back to do something that, like you said, Jack, was just a special thing and done in a special way. It's great to see that. I think that's tough, and it doesn't always come to pass. But what a more gratifying thing to be able to do that again. There's no lost time there, it feels.
Yeah, it's very, very kind of you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to hear that, Jack. I completely had forgotten the legend and the lore in my mind of 2002 when we got back together was just the two of us in the Gypsy. I totally forgot about his apartment in Queens. So thank you.
You made the first gesture, Cary.
Yeah. But I will say, and not to get to whatever movie of the week, if that's even a thing, but like we showed up, we got together, and it's kind of a testament to the relationship. It was like, okay, hey man, yeah, not a lot needs to be said here, but I'm happy you're here. You know what I mean? Like we kind of got on with it, we got on with it. And I think that's life. I mean, it's Cary and I have the longest standing close relationship in my life. I mean, aside from, my parents and, my brother and stuff, but, I mean, we've been tight since we were 18, and with that comes life, things happen, things get in the way, and strong relationships, strong friendships kind of, there's some give and take. I mean, Cary's definitely given a lot back to me over the years, this hasn't been easy by any stretch, on many levels for many people. So, there's a really tight personal relationship that's there, and it's hard to believe. We talk about it, Cary will mention it, like we've been back together like twice as long as we were ever together or something. I don't know what the math is, but that was 2002. So
those are the 20. You were 20. You were in your 20s, right?
I was 16.
Well, I'll tell you this. I want to say this. I want to get this in there, that the biggest thing we have now that we did not have before was gratitude for each other, a massive amount of gratitude for each other. Like I have such admiration for Jack. Jack always poo-poos me on this, but he's such a great writer. He's a poet. He's just stuff. I'm literally waiting for his next song so I can either just be a fan of it or kind of get in there and try to get my 20% of the publishing if I can somehow by changing or helping him out. That was a huge deal that he allowed me to produce. Promise of Summer was when we started writing again. We've been back together for years. And then he would bring me, we always like Bring on the Weather, his songs. It's like every other song. I don't know if you realize that on Bring on the Weather, it's Jack's all the odd, I'm all the even. It just happened to work out that way. And we didn't really delve in each other's writing much at all. And so for him to let me come in, be a part, I'd produced so many records at that point, and I just wanted more, as you can imagine, more Jack, more Jack songs, more just stuff. Like I'm such a fan, I still listen to March or My Time or Heroes. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, the poet that I get to hang out with and be part of. And he's got a playing style that's super cool. Like you guys are players, he does something weird that, I watch him on a stage show and I'm like, dude, he's just got this thing, like I've got my tricks, but then I'm like, dude, he does some cool stuff, man. So just the gratitude for each other, and then gratitude for fans, for our manager, for our agent. Golly, every time we have a gig, we're like, man, thank you. Thanks for bringing us here. And we were such jerks before. It just became such the norm. Like, oh yeah, you will host us at your venue and we will come in and we will do, man, just massive shift. The gratitude piece is ginormous. That's, to younger artists, I would say, start now, every single thing, be grateful, even for the crappy stuff, the crappy gig, the owner ran off with your money. Be grateful for every bit of it, because it will grow you into the artist you'll become. You have to go through all that stuff. You got to go through the bad stuff, be grateful for all of it, because that's it. That's what we're all doing. We're all on the journey, right? It's all about the journey. We always, every time we've gotten there, we're always like, this isn't what we've arrived many times, got signed to a major label, played in front of 500,000 people. We've, got it. We finally got on a tour bus, like this is it. We're here, finally get to open for our favorite band, finally get to headline that club we've been opening for the last 5 years, and then anyway, so
well,
don't get me started.
No, this is fantastic. This brings me to, so we're calling this archived series of conversations, this podcast, we're calling it, the moment you made it. And it's a different interpretation for everybody. It could be the minute they wrote their first song. It could be the minute they got their gold record and retired. It could be whatever you want, but we all kind of say a perceived moment. And for me, having gone through this with the guy I played music with more than anybody else, Pat Green, the leaving the Pat band in 2010 and coming back to just be able to play music with them and to approach it with real, like you said, gratitude and an appreciation for what all of the things that it brought me, good and bad, allows me to do it with such joy now. I wish I'd had it from day one, but sometimes you don't know what that feeling is until it's taken away or you leave it. But I'd say, for me, the moment I could say Jackopierce made it is when you decided that, putting that shared history back together to do things that you both appreciate and to, be grateful for what you both appreciate about what you both bring to it, and all the things that'll allow you to do for as long as you want to continue to do it is a real moment that I'd stick on the board. I think that's a huge step that, gosh, a lot of people just don't get to take in their careers.
That's huge. And I love you saying joy. That's a huge word. Huge word.
Yeah.
So much joy. Jack and I both. We really enjoy each other and joy. I'm sure that means joy together.
Sure.
And
sure,
I mean,
joy.
Yeah, we enjoy each other. We literally enjoy each other. Like I get gigs all the time where Jack can't make it, so I can do solo, or I get a solo gig and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll play solo. Yeah, but I'd rather do it with Jack. It's just so much more fun to meet up, hang out, BS, because we're like brothers. We could be in the car, and hang out. My favorite thing is, or my conversations with Jack are very limited in the car, because he's always like, hey, what's that podcast you're listening to, that Hugh Jackman podcast with Tim Ferriss? Yeah, pop that in. I want to hear something. I mean, he's out like 30 seconds. He's like, hey, it's Hugh Jackman here. Yeah, just going to tell you about my life. And he's out. So Jack and I, really good QT of me driving and Jack sleeping. It's been great for the last
It's true
30 years.
No, I think
Go ahead.
to look forward to playing. There was a period of time where it just was. I got to the point where it was getting harder and harder just to manage everything. And I think I feel like I've made it now that I experience just the joy of playing music and actually making a living at it. I mean, wow. And, and Cary, Cary's the driving force behind JP. And, I'm just thankful for him always pushing me and always pushing the band and being the steward, So we, this feeling of we'll pick each other up when we need to pick each other up is a strong feeling.
Well, I think,
and the jokes are good. The jokes are just.
Bits are really good. There's some good.
I know the jokes. Well, look, I think if there's a better place to end it, I cannot think of one. I think the joy you're able to bring to other people by enjoying working with each other, it's very evident. And I think the amount of information that folks who are coming up or folks who are struggling with something or trying to make it in this business are going to take away from this, I think will be invaluable. So, on behalf of, Fred and Nick and myself, thank you both for the time. And if you're interested in what they're up to today, Dal Hatton Project is a very cool thing that's getting kicked off. There's singles being released. There are some cover songs they're putting out that are a lot of fun. Some new original stuff coming up. There's a Patreon page you can visit, like Cary talked about. But the point is, they're working together, and there's new stuff coming out, and it's a real testament to maturity and gratitude. And it's great to have you both. Thank you so much for the time, fellas. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing.
Great to see you guys.
Catch up with you soon, I hope. Take care.
Bye, boss.
All right, see you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to The Moment You Made It. Got a question, comment, or great idea for an upcoming guest? Let us know. Shoot us a note at hello@momentyoumadeit.com. That's hello@momentyoumadeit.com. Thanks for tuning in, and see y'all next week.